Okay, so we're recording now, and then I'm going to put it onto Facebook Live. Choose where you want to put it. Show on Facebook. Timeline. Share on a page you manage. That's what we want. There we go. Great.
Make sure you put a snazzy description and then a snazzy video. Like a snazzy post and a snazzy description.
Yeah. Dimitri, our social media gurus, got that on lock.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, let me grab some lipstick because I need to put something on my lips before I...
Sure.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay. And now I'll click, in this I can put Federal PPP and LA Main Street.
Oh, no.
Okay, go live.
I guess this one's better.
Great. So we should be up live now. Cool. Well, thank you everyone who's out there watching. This is another Justice and Accountability Center panel that we're having today. This time about the Federal Paycheck Protection Program, as well as the Louisiana Main Street program. Those are two different programs, one a federal program and another state program that can help those who have small businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19. So thank you everyone who's watching right now. And I just want to go through some of our typical warning and explainers for those who are watching. So nothing in this panel is serving as legal advice, but it's general information to help educate people on these federal programs and the state program, COVID-19 pandemic. This video session is going to be recorded. If you have any questions, please type in the Facebook Live chat, and we can address some of those questions the best that we can in our Q&A session towards the end of the panel. And please note that in those comment sections, JAC Louisiana is the Justice Accountability Center of Louisiana. And any comments made by anyone else other than the Justice and Accountability Center of Louisiana, it doesn't reflect our opinions, political views, things of that sort by JAC. And any such comments do not reflect legal opinion, analysis, or advice from JAC, its attorneys, or staff that you might see that Facebook chat. Just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Joshua Branch. Josh, I'm a policy program manager of the Justice and Accountability Center of Louisiana, so I help coordinate some of our clinics and policy programs that we conduct. And I'm so happy to have Lindsay Navarro with us. She's been very generous sharing her time with us in such quick notice because a lot of these things sort of like came into play just about a few weeks ago, and we really coordinated and hammered down a time to get this panel going. So thank you, Lindsay, for being with us. And I want to introduce her quickly. She's the founder and executive director of El Centro, Inc. It's a not-for-profit providing financial literacy and business training to the Latino community in South Louisiana. Since launching in 2018, El Centro has served nearly 1,300 Spanish-speaking individuals, and prior to launching the organization, Navarro spent 7 years working with Lift Fund, formerly known as Acción Louisiana, where she was hired as the first bilingual loan officer outside of Texas. As a business development officer, she was responsible for the development, cultivate, and growth of businesses lending for Lift Fund in the state of Louisiana. And she helped deploy more than $1.2 million in microloans to Latino and entrepreneurs across Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, and Tennessee. Ms. Navarro holds an MBA from Loyola University of New Orleans and a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from St. University. She serves members of the board for the Committee for a Better New Orleans. She's president emeritus of the board for Fund 17, co-chair of the board for the Crescent City Community Land Trust. She served as the professional development chair for the Hispanic Young Professionals of Louisiana in 2018. She's a committee of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Louisiana. And in 2018, she was featured as a hero local hero by Telemundo 42. She's a 2018 Brian Bell Metropolitan Leadership former alumnus, 2017 Nexus City Fellow, 2017 New Orleans Civic Leader Academy Fellow, 2015 National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders. And in 2014, she received Excelencia's Award for Community Service Business for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana. And again, thank you so much, Lindsay, for making space for us to have a conversation about these important things.
Thank you, Joshua. It's a pleasure to be here. This is really exciting. It's fun to hear my bio read.
Yeah, it can be a little awkward sometimes to hear yourself in the third person. Such an impressive bio, and again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Again, it's an honor. I mean, I think a lot of what we do is really just serving the community and getting the right information into the hands of folks so they can make better decisions. And I just really think that's key. So again, our goal is to really empower folks with information so they can make smarter decisions about starting, growing both their financial lives as well as their small businesses.
Thank you. Yeah. So, well, let's hop into it. So the way that we've structured this conversation, we're going, for those folks who are watching, we're going to be talking about the Federal PPP program first, and then we'll talk about the Louisiana Main Street program afterwards, okay? So I just want to make sure folks are keeping clear in mind that when we're talking about the PPP program, that's a federal program. And when we're talking about the Louisiana or LA Main Street program, that's a state program funded with state money. So let's get into this. Could you explain to folks what the Federal Paycheck Protection Program is? Just sort of like a general overview of that Federal Paycheck Protection Program.
Yeah, so I'll take it back even further. So because a lot of folks don't necessarily know how not necessarily, but how the program originated, but what the entity is that is essentially guaranteeing these loans. And I think it's really key for folks to understand. So first, I'd like to start by saying that this is a program that, yes, it's it's something that passed through legislation. So it passed through Congress, it passed through the House of Representatives, and was signed essentially into existence by the President of the United States. But this is a program of what's called the SBA, or the Small Business Administration. Typically, the Small Business Administration is an entity, it's an arm of the government. It's essentially this administration that, or the Small Business Administration, or the SBA, is essentially this organization that typically guarantees higher risk loans for banks to extend additional credit. And in times of emergency, natural disasters, we do see the SBA essentially creating some sort of a product or support, financial support that's made available directly to the community. So post Katrina, right, in 2020, wow, it feels like it was so long ago, right, in 2005. So when Katrina happened, the SBA essentially stepped in, and they made loans to small business owners so that they can essentially continue to operate. Similarly, like today, right? So similarly, this program, or the PPP program, is something that the SBA is essentially guaranteeing. And they currently have two options available. One that's a product that's directly available through the SBA, which is called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And then the second portion of that is the PPP. The PPP is an extension of what's called the 7A Community Advantage Program, or the 7A program of the SBA. And the reason it's a part of that program, because it follows similar guidelines to what that 7A program actually is. So it's a lot easier to say to a bank, you remember that 7A product that you've been pushing? We're now going to make a modification to it and make some exceptions to it, but this is essentially that product under a different name and under a different specified use. So the PPP essentially was created. So most people ask, well, where do I go to get the PPP? The PPP is a product that's available through a financial institution. If you go to the SBA site, which is sba.gov, it's really, really important to understand that. It's sba.gov. You can actually select I've been impacted by COVID-19 and I'm looking for money like relief efforts or recovery efforts. And there's actually a link to the financial institutions that are currently providing access to the PPP. And this was a product that's essentially provided through the larger banks, the community banks, and even what's called CDFIs, or Community Development Financial Institutions. There were essentially 2 rounds of the PPP that happened. One where the PPP essentially launched, and there was about a week of applications that came through. The system was flooded, and then they ran out of money to give to small businesses. And so Congress essentially signed into action the CARES Act, which was a follow-up to the original act that was created. I think it's an extension of the CARES Act. And to make additional funding available. And the second time around, the funding was available and specifically allocated to those community banks and to CDFIs. And so most people will say, well, what does that really mean? The average business owner isn't going to qualify at a bank for a small business loan. A lot of times when you're applying for a loan, it's your first time. And usually it's tough when it's your first time. If you then tack on the economic stress of the coronavirus and the impact it's had in the economy, that it kind of gives you an idea of, it's like, okay, you're flustered when you go to a bank for your first time for your first business loan, and now you're in dire need of this money. And so finding and experiencing that paperwork, I think, to begin with, can be really overwhelming. And so not to mention, I think that every bank, every financial institution has its own requirements, and they have their own, what we like to call sweet spot. And if you go to a bigger bank, those bigger banks are expecting the business owners to have better credit, to have higher cash flow, all of those things. And so if that's not the case for you, well, then a bigger bank isn't going to be the option. Perhaps a community bank or a CDFI is the option. And so in a past life, right, I worked for Lift Fund, which was a micro lender, and they are actually recipients and providers of the PPP program. So they're an SBA partner. So the SBA has essentially partnered with big banks, community banks, and CDFIs, which they exist in various forms. But in this, or what's relevant to this situation, you'd be looking at essentially a loan fund, which is what Lift Fund was, or what Lift Fund is, and then also maybe a credit union like Hope Credit Union, right? Or even On Path Credit Union. So there are local credit unions that are partnered with the SBA and can offer the PPP. And so, so the PPP was essentially a loan. It's a small business loan that is calculated based on the capacity, not the capacity of the business, but on the profit of the business. So there's a calculator to identify what the monthly income of the business owner, or what the income or what the salaries were for those employees. The goal of the product is really to keep a business running. It's not to grow the business. It's not to invest more money in the business. It's really meant to keep the business afloat. And when it was created, so it's meant to build essentially capacity for you to cover 2.5 months of operating costs. But those costs are based specifically in what is spent on payroll. So if you have W-2 employees, those are considered payrolled employees, or what you as a business owner. So a lot of folks have LLCs and they're sole proprietors. And so the amount that would be lent to them is based on what they take at the end of the year as net profit. And they take that net profit. If you divide it by 12, you get an idea of what the monthly income actually is, and they multiply that by 2.5. And that essentially gives the business owner an idea of how much money that they'll be eligible for. And the idea of this, or the best part about this product, is that I think the interest rate it's a 1% interest rate if you decide, if it's not forgiven. better said. And so there are specific requirements that you have to meet in order for this loan to essentially be forgiven. And originally the requirement was that 75% of the money that was received had to be spent on salary or on those employees, on paying those employees. And now that has been, with the changes we've seen, it's actually closer to 60%. So you can spend, you'd have to spend a minimum of 60% of what you receive on salary and employees in order for the loan to essentially be forgiven. Some folks are like, well, maybe I just want this as a loan and I just want to pay it back. And you can totally do that if that's what you choose to do. But there is a forgivable portion. And so you'd have to meet those specific use requirements in order for that portion to actually be forgiven. That was a lot.
Now that you're, no, thank you. Very thorough. Well, could you give us an example then about like some of the costs that could fall into that 40% that you were referring to as well?
Yeah. So I know that the money can essentially be spent on rent. It can be spent on mortgage interest. So if you are operating a commercial location, right? So let's say I own the building where my restaurant is located, you can use the money to pay the interest on the loan, on the mortgage, but you cannot use it to pay the full mortgage. So you can use it on salary, and you can also use it for ongoing expenses, or for, I believe, it's essentially, it's not, the word for it is not fixed expenses, but it's more like recurring expenses you can spend the rest of that money on. So let's say though that you accepted that money and you decided that you were going to use 60% on it to buy a new vehicle to make deliveries. Well, that wasn't an existing expense. That's something new. So that's more of an expansion or an extension of the business. And this product was not created for that. And so the risk that you run in using the money that way is that in the event that there is an audit or that you do get audited, the SBA will essentially, and the SBA, the bank potentially will essentially ask you, how did you spend the money? And can you provide proof as to how your money was spent? So the back end of this product, right? So originally it was created so that you had to spend the money on salary within the first 10 weeks. Now they've extended that period of spending that salary out through 24 weeks. And the reason for this is that the goal of the money was to keep those employees working and on staff, right? And on payroll, essentially. That's why the Paycheck Protection Plan, right? So they're essentially protecting the paychecks of the employees within that business. And so that money has to be essentially spent in those 24 weeks, or you have to get up to the original number of employees that you had prior to receiving the loan, but when the loan was calculated. Right. So there's a calculator, like I said, specifically. So if you have 2 or 3 employees, they find out what the salary is of those 2 or 3 employees, and that amount, you essentially have to be spending that amount by week 24 in order for that loan to essentially be forgiven. It's a little more complex than that, but that gives you just kind of a general idea of what it would take, right? So there is a process, again, for that forgiven. In order for the loan to be forgiven, it's going to require, there are 2 different forms. I think there's an easy application to have it forgiven, and there's a longer form. I think it depends. I don't know if it depends on the loan amount. I haven't really, I've helped more people apply. I have yet to help someone go through the forgiveness process, just because it's really only been, I would say it's been about 6 weeks now, since the folks that we helped have actually received their funding.
Yeah, great, thank you. And for folks who are watching too, in the comment section, I've put a link to the SBA website where you can learn more about the federal PPP program that you could follow up as well. And I'll be putting in the comment section as well a link to JAC's page, so you can find resources there too. But so continuing with our conversation, Lindsay, what sort of like changes have been made to the federal PPP program from the first sort of round, if you will, to now?
Yeah, so initially, some of it was the term, right, that I mentioned originally, the PPP well, originally the deadline to apply for the PPP was June 31st. Now that deadline, I'm sorry, July 31st, and now, no, June 31st, and now, or June 30th? June 30th is how many days are in June. I'm looking at my calendar. So June 30th was the original deadline. That deadline was now extended into August. So now August 8th is the deadline in order to apply for the PPP. Again, there were changes made to who could essentially make those loans, because they felt that a lot of the bigger banks were making loans to bigger companies. And so they wanted to make sure that they extended that money down to the smaller businesses, which is why now you see so many CDFIs participating and so many more community banks participating in the program. So there was that change, an extension to the deadline date. There was also a change to the usage of time, or the usage of the funding. So originally the funding had to be used within 8 weeks. And now that funding was then changed out to 24 weeks. I actually pulled notes here because I wanted to make sure that I didn't make anything up while I was talking to you all about this. So originally the time to use those loans proceeds were 8 weeks, and now it has extended out to 24 weeks. So the borrowers essentially have more time to spend the money down. Then additional changes, let's see. I know that there were changes also to those who were eligible, because initially, if someone had, where did I put that note? I put it somewhere.
Previously there were, for folks who had like prior criminal records, they were barred from applying for the old federal PPP program.
Correct. So originally there was, so one of the questions, or a few of the questions, I think they appear, I feel like they appear multiple times in the application, ask whether or not a person has been found guilty or is currently being prosecuted for some sort of a felony, if they've ever been convicted of a felony, pled guilty for a felony, pled nolo contendere for a felony, or if they've ever been placed on any type of parole or probation. And originally the questions asked if this had happened within the 5 years, or within the most recent 5 years. And so that time period has actually now gotten shortened to 1 year. So instead of asking if this happened in the past 5 years, it's asking if this happened in the most recent year. And so the period, though, was remaining. So that period of time was essentially reduced from 5 years to 1 in determining the eligibility for those applicants. And I just want to be very, very clear. I think a lot of folks, there's like a misinterpretation. It's like a misfire within people's brains when they hear the PPP and they say, well, this is a loan for people who have employees on salary. I don't have any employees on salary. I have a bunch of 1099 employees. This isn't for me. The PPP has an option for sole proprietors. It has an option for independent contractors. It has an option for LLCs that are set up as sole proprietors, and for those other businesses they can essentially help any business that has less than 500 employees. So it's a fairly large range of people who are eligible for this product. And again, the way they calculate the loan amount, or what that person is eligible for, is based on what's reported in their tax filing. So you have to look at that 2019 tax filing, or the 2018, now the 2019, because it was required. So then again, back to the changes. So I think a lot of folks thought that they weren't eligible. And I think that there are a lot of formerly incarcerated individuals who have started businesses because it's been difficult for them to find jobs after their situation, right? So I think that it's really, so we see, I think, a lot of entrepreneurs then thinking that they first of all, thinking that they're not eligible because of their size. And then secondly, they may have been fearful of applying because of anything that they have on their record, right? So I think that the change to the requirements, or to the question, right, of asking or having this look back period reduced from 5 years to 1 can make a really big difference. But I do want to be very clear that, and those questions are typical on any SBA application. So Lift Fund was an SBA, they are an SBA lender. And so I've helped people complete the SBA application. And that was always a question on there. Even if you are on the lender's side and you are the lender applying to work with the SBA, you're required to have all of your employees state whether or not they have had any, whether or not they've ever been arrested, ever been found guilty of a felony, or ever had to plea to pretrial intervention. So this is a very common question in the application itself. But what they're really looking for specifically in these questions, and usually they put the question in there and then they say, if your answer to this is yes, please provide an explanation. What exactly happened? What was the outcome? Was time served? Like all those things. And they want to know the details around your situation, because what they're really looking to determine is whether or not, so for example, what they didn't change here in this case was the period for felonies having occurred in the past 5 years that are related to fraud, or that are related to bribery, or that are related to embezzlement, or any felonies related to false statement on the loan application for federal financial assistance. So what they're really looking for, or those folks who are really left out of this, are those who have proven their ability to mismanage funds. And so that's really what they're really looking for. So that's essentially, I think, the change that you were alluding to, right? And that you were looking for me to discuss. So
yeah, that would. Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to sort of reiterate your point too, Lindsay. If you're a formerly incarcerated person and you're previously denied federal PPP, I encourage those folks to, reapply because, there was a big wave of folks who were denied, access to these funds, and, your circumstances, you very well may qualify. And it's really easy to become discouraged, especially nowadays with everything going on right now. And I couldn't imagine the stress of being a small business owner right now. So I would just really encourage those folks to apply. So Lindsay, let's say someone had applied previously, but they were denied federal PPP funding. Is there anything, like, what sort of recourse or what sort of options might they have to potentially resolve?
Yeah, there's certainly an appeals process that's in place. So I think the common error or the common mistake that we see business owners make is that they're like, oh no, I was denied. And they're like, oh, it's the end of the world. I'm never gonna, they just completely give up. Like this is not the time to give up. This is the time to fight for your rights and fight for that money. Like, you're deserving of it. I think you have to understand too, this is the first time nationally that we've seen, or even internationally, globally, that we've seen a situation to this, at this extent, right? The extent to which so many business owners need access to the capital. It's so important for these small businesses to be able to continue to employ their community around them. And I think that too, it's what we have to remember is that the person on the other side reviewing this application is a human being. It's not a robot. And that human being, what I've been seeing a lot of times is that they don't know what documents to ask for if they're looking for a social security number, because they're just assuming that everyone has a social security card, and they don't realize that the situation is different for various residents who have social security numbers. And so I think that what I've seen is contractors interpreting they're essentially interpreting this product and the process and the guidelines, and it's not necessarily follows what maybe the product was even intended for. So what I can say is that it is important for you, if you received an email stating that you were denied, to respond to it, and then to either request additional time. I know that there's a form specifically, and I'm sure I can find it and send it to you all. I would say that another contact that you really need to have is a contact at the LSBDC. The LSBDC is the Louisiana Small Business Development Center. So they are an extension of the SBA, and they work hand in hand with the SBA. We're partners with the SBA and with the LSBDC. And so these guys are experts in connecting folks to capital. And so they have the process down to the T, and what that appeals process looks like. You need to be prepared to provide all the documentation necessary. And in this case, more information is better than less. Like I said, I think what I see with a lot of entrepreneurs is that they send like the minimal of what documents. It's like, they're like, well, the bank said a bank statement, so they send just the first page. They're like, that's enough. It's like, no. And when we're asking for bank statements, we're asking for the front and back of every page, regardless of whether or not it's empty. So most people are like, well, I didn't scan the blank page. And it's like, well, I needed to see the scanned blank page because federally I'm required to, or, X, Y reason. And so, the business owner doesn't really think that way, right? The business owner thinks, well, you're seeing how much I'm depositing, you're seeing how much is leaving the account. Why do you need to see the proof of what checks were actually deposited? Why do you need all 6 pages of my bank statements? And the reality is that's what it's going to take for underwriting to take a look and determine, what money is coming in and out of your business. Are you a legitimate business? How are you keeping your business afloat? So those are all the things that they're going to be looking for. So again, in this case, not the statement, the adage "less is more" does not hold true. It's more is more, or more is better. So especially when it comes to lending, I mean, the more information you can provide a lender to determine whether or not you're eligible, I mean, you need to state your case, right? And so that's essentially what you're going to be required to do.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. And I also put the in the comments a link to the Louisiana Small Business Development Center too, so you can check that out for more information. So just to reiterate for people out there, the deadline for the Federal PPP is August 2020, so that's coming up, pretty quickly in a few weeks. And just one last note on that too. So someone's getting ready to apply. I mean, right now, what are some key documents that they should be trying to get in order, generally speaking?
So if you're planning to apply, the entity is going to need proof that you are a business. So if you are, well, it depends, right? So every application is different. If you're applying as an independent contractor and you don't have a business registered, then you're not required to supply or to provide the business registration. But if you are applying as an LLC, then you do need to provide the proof that the business is registered with the Secretary of State, and that the annual report is current. So every year, that's something that has to be reapplied for. You would have to provide a complete copy of your 2019 business tax returns, so that the financial institution can look at that Schedule C and determine how much money was made, or they can look at your 1065, I believe, and determine how much money the business made, if there was a profit, if there wasn't a profit. Now, if there was no profit to your business, you are not going to be eligible. So they're looking to see if there was a positive number in there or if there was a negative number in there. And if it's negative, it's I would not even waste my time applying if it's negative. So the return needs to be a positive return. And what we're looking at, the majority of folks I'm sure listening to me probably file as sole proprietors, and they file a Schedule C if they have an LLC. And so on that Schedule C, what we're looking at is line 31, just to be very clear. So again, the business registration, the profit and loss, the bank or the financial institution is going to want to see your year-to-date financial statements. And those financial statements are going to be your profit and loss, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement from January 1, 2020 to July 20, 2020. So unfortunately, the longer time passes, the more documentation is required. And then I believe they'll ask you for a proof of identity and your the information to make an automated deposit into your bank account. Various institutions have different applications. Some are using like a third-party app to apply. Others are doing an internal process. Eventually, you will see the old school SBA application that you have to fill out, and you just simply fill it out the same way you filled out that initial app. And again, the best way to do this is to go directly to the financial institution and to apply. The SBA does not have the PPP available on its website. They have a link to the financial institutions that are providing the PPP, but they will not be making that direct contribution to you. So it's a two-step process. The bank or the financial institution does the underwriting. They then send the documents over to the SBA. The SBA reviews, and they say, all clear, this is great. Let's get with an auto deposit. And we've seen folks close in as short as, I think 7 days is the shortest I've seen people close, out to 10 to 15 days. It usually depends on the applicant and how quick they are about getting the information together. So if you can compile that information together, at the time of application, that's definitely when you want to have it all done. You don't want the lender you don't want the back and forth with the lender where they're like, oh, well, this doesn't have a signature. Oh, this doesn't have page 4. Oh, this doesn't, like, that's why it's really, really important that you provide complete documents, because what you don't want is for them to give you like an easy approval. You're sitting there waiting on the money. You missed an email that says, oh, you forgot to sign here. And so you're now waiting on your loan that's been pre-approved by the SBA, but you're waiting on the money on your end. So a lot of times, so it's just really important for you to stay and maintain contact with that lender as you go through that application process.
This delays really, I imagine, kill people once they get through this like bureaucratic process with delay on delay on delay, I imagine.
Yeah, well, and then also when it gets to the point of closing, don't use your cell phone to do a loan closing, people. Use your computer or use a bigger tablet. So, the biggest challenge that I've had on my end is that I work with a lot of, all of my customers are Latinx, right? So they all speak predominantly Spanish, and the application is available in paper in Spanish, but online, the application is not an application in Spanish. It's an application in English. And when they get to the loan closing, they're seeing those SBA forms for the first time, and they can't remember how we filled out that application. And so, they get stuck, and they get stuck because of language. And I think a lot of us, it's a document that you're signing, and you're committing to using the money the way you said you were going to use it, and you run the risk of an audit. So it's important to treat it that way. And to take it seriously. I mean, if you misuse the funding, you're going to be required to repay it in a 2-year term. So, 1% isn't the end of the world. I mean, that's fabulous. It's a great rate. But if you end up having to repay it when you weren't planning to repay it, I think that it can catch a lot of folks off guard. So.
Thank you. And so again, folks, that for the federal PPP, the deadline is August 8th. Just want to plug that date as much as possible.
Apply.
Yeah. So let's do a transition now from the federal PPP program, and let's start talking about the Louisiana Main Street program. This is a program. It's state-based, and Lindsay, I'll let you explain. So could you explain for the audience, what is this Louisiana Main Street program?
Yeah, so the Louisiana Main Street program, it's actually called the Louisiana Main Street Recovery Grant Program. I've got the application or the eligibility requirements here in front of me. So this was essentially announced maybe 2 weeks ago. I think a lot of folks are really excited about it. The application doesn't actually open for another 8 days. So what does that mean? That means you should visit the site now. So LouisianaMainStreet.com is the actual site where you can go in and see what the requirements are. I'm going to read a few of them to you. But ideally, this product was created by the state. I think it's funded federally, to be honest. But so it's essentially created by the state, or the money, it's actually a grant program. Okay. So it's not even a business loan, but they are going to be limited in the number of loans that they can actually make. So it's going to be extremely competitive. Okay. So that I will say, so it's specifically meant to help businesses that haven't received financial assistance from other sources. so, and what are they talking about? So if you applied for the PPP and you applied for the EIDL and you're in process, or you're getting money for either one of those, you are not eligible for this program. Don't be one of those people who gets money and then applies for more money. Give other folks the chance to gain access to this, because there are businesses out there that for X, Y, or Z have been denied and aren't eligible. And so this is like their last chance. This is their last hope, right? I hate to sound like Star Wars, but this is their hope, to apply for this funding. So businesses may be eligible if the business incurred any type of interruption, disruption, or unplanned expenses, or extraordinary costs associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, or if they've experienced any of those hardships, right? Due to the public health measures put in place by the state and local government officials. So, your business was forced to be temporarily closed. There were mandates that were issued, state closure and also parish closures, and within various cities. So these are the, if you had to close your business and you did not qualify for the PPP and you did not qualify for the EIDL, then this is a good fit for you, okay? Now the money that can be used, again, it's not really meant to be, I think some of this can be used as a little more investable money, but it is, let me give you the requirements on what those business requirements are, because I think when I saw them, I was like, oh, this could be really helpful. So this money is for businesses who are domiciled or based in Louisiana and have been here since March 1st, 2020. Okay, so there's a 15-day difference between the PPP that was required for the business to have been in business by February 15th. You have to have suffered some sort of interruption, at least 50% of the business. So if you have a partner, you have multiple partners, 50% of those business owners, or 50% of those in the partnership, must be Louisiana residents. So it means that they must reside in Louisiana. They have to have filed their taxes in the state of Louisiana. Again, this is another way to verify that the person is a resident of the state. They have to have filed Louisiana taxes in 2018 or 2019, and they plan to file them in the future. They have this business. This is for smaller businesses, for people with less than 50 full-time employees. So I think that's a really big difference between the federal program and this local program. They have to be businesses with a physical location. Okay, so now we're talking about, you have a storefront, you are a doctor's office, you are a dentist's office, you are maybe a law firm with a fixed storefront. Maybe you do file taxes and you're a tax preparer and you had people that had to come into your place and you had to close for X period of time. So now we're talking about a business that has a physical location that had to close. And then also, if you can't be part of a bigger business that has more than 50 full-time employees. So what does that mean? This typically means maybe you are a franchise. I would think this would kind of allude to franchises, or even because a franchise owner would essentially have a big business and they might have essentially subsidiaries underneath them. So as long as there are no more than 50 full-time workers, so you can't be part of a bigger business with more than 50 full-time workers. Does not exist for the purpose of advancing partisan political activity, does not directly lobby federal or state officials. So you can't be a lobbyist, you can't have partake in any type of political partisan activity. And it has to be a business that doesn't derive income from passive investments without active participation in business operations. So what does this mean? You can't be an investor in a business that operates and be eligible for this funding, right? It's for business owners who operate, again, physical locations. There's actually a quiz posted on here that you can take that'll tell you. So if you are like, I don't know how I feel about what you just said, Lindsay, you can click on the take the eligibility quiz, and you can determine whether or not you are eligible. So there's going to be an application online. It looks like there is also application assistance. I know that I think we are participating as assistants assistance providers. I was looking for the word. And I'm sure, I know for a fact, I know the LSBDC will also be helping with this as well. So I think now is definitely the time that if you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, and you have no idea what are the entrepreneurial resources in the community, now's the time to look. I'm going to point you in one really easy, quick direction, and it's actually nolaba.org. So if you go to nolaba.org, that's the New Orleans Business Alliance. In there, you can actually sort for technical assistance providers, organizations like mine, who work with entrepreneurs. You can actually sort through the list, I think even based on like region. So they have it listed out who all the providers are. So we're talking about, Propeller, we're talking about Idea Village, we're talking about the SBDC, we're talking about Good Work Network, Coastal Community Services, I think. So there are a lot of organizations like El Centro who work in the community and are more than happy to help and have been working to familiarize themselves with these products so that we can give our entrepreneurs a leg up and get them the access to the capital that they really need to keep their businesses afloat. So those are the basic eligibility requirements, and that's my little that's my piece of advice, I would say, for you all.
No, thank you. Yeah, and folks, I also put in the comments section a link to the Louisiana Main Street Recovery Grant Program, where you can take that the little quiz, the 6-question quiz, to see if you would be eligible. And then thank you, Lindsay, for that other resource, the New Orleans Business Alliance, that has applicant assistance or connections to or a network of assistant. And I put that link into the comments as well that you folks can utilize. So, sorry, were you going to say something?
I wanted to add that I have, to an extent, been following this grant, or kind of loosely following it, right? For this grant program. And I think what happens a lot of times is a lot of times these grant programs, in order to verify that an applicant truly is eligible or that they do really meet the need, they may choose. So this is the tricky thing with this program, right? That we have a program that sounds really, really great. And then you get into it, you apply, and then they tell you, oh, you have to provide receipts for all of these expenditures that they have already been made, and now we're just reimbursing you. I don't know if that is going to be the case. I think even if this were to function as a loan, what they would be asking you for is they're going to want to know what expenses have been incurred by the business and what you plan to incur in order to get your business operational again. So if they do ask for something like that, do be prepared to provide those things. It's not uncommon for a lender to say, oh, you want to expand your business? Well, provide me receipts or provide me like purchase orders or invoices for the things that you plan to buy in order to get your business operational again. Because a lot of folks then ask, okay, so we're getting this $15,000. It's up to $15,000. Okay, so it's not a full flat $15,000. It's up to $15,000. And so it says what expenses, one of the questions here that you'll see in like the frequently asked questions. So I would suggest you go to louisianamainstreet.com and go to the frequently asked questions section, familiarize yourself with it. Go to the part that says, what documents will I be required to provide? Pull that documentation together, because when this application opens up, everyone knows about it. So it's going to be a race to the finish. It's America's greatest race, or Louisiana's. So do look again to make sure that the reason or what your plans for use of the money are like meet the eligibility requirements. So here it says that you can essentially, it says eligible expenses that this money can be used on, right? That money can be used for are costs incurred by the business to meet public health requirements, or the recommendations enacted by the Louisiana Department of Health. So it includes, but not limited to, costs for creating social distancing measures and signs. So you're reopening, you need to put that sign at the front door. You put those markers on the floor if you have people who like check out, that kind of thing. It's the costs to clean and disinfect the areas. So if you have a business that you plan to disinfect regularly, purchasing equipment to protect your employees. So PPE, hand sanitizer, masks, gloves, thermometers, those types of things. Any contactless equipment, right? So like a credit card reader that like you can just tap and you know, that kind of thing. So contactless equipment. Expenses to facilitate teleworking. So if you have, if you were a tax preparer and you were seeing people on site, well, then now you had to like add a Zoom and you had to get a special certification to accept online applications or whatever. And maybe you had to integrate a ton of equipment into your new operation. Maybe you had to buy laptops for your employees that you didn't have otherwise, or printers for them to print at home, or scanners. Well, then this is an expense that's acceptable. Any necessary reopening expenses, tents. So a lot of restaurants have been forced to use their parking lots now. And so they have to put out a tent or outdoor tables. They have to buy more furniture for the outdoors, those things as well. You can use the money on signage pertaining to the reopening or restructuring. And then also the installation of drive-through windows. Y'all, this would be really cool to see every business around town with a drive-through window. But so that gives you an idea, I think. And then the costs it can also cover are like the unemployment insurance costs, providing paid sick leave moving forward, inventory replacement. So if you had spoiled food and you lost a bunch of money, you know, on the food that because you couldn't open the restaurant for another 2 weeks, any increased labor costs, like if you had to hire a food driver. You can use it also on mortgage interest. So similar to, but this time for a home office. I don't know how that would really work. Seems slightly counterintuitive. You can use it on rent, you can use it on payroll, and you can use it on utilities. So I think that there's another question here that says what expenses can't be calculated into grant eligibility. So you can also determine whether or not what you want to spend the money on is actually eligible or not. So that'll give you a much clearer idea. So again, I think the biggest key here is to inform yourselves, to get the information up front. You know, these things just take time. The application is going to take time. You've got about 8 days to apply for this. And again, I think that they will most likely ask you for proof that you were not eligible for the PPP or the EIDL, which means either you will have to say, like, show a tax return that says, see, it was negative and they told me not to apply, or, you know, you're going to have some sort of a denial letter that would have triggered this. So that's typically the way that a lender asks for proof. In the past, that's what the SBA did. They asked for denial letters from the bank in order for the SBA to make the loan. So, I think if you can inform yourself about the use of the funds, kind of put together a list of how you plan to use the money as well, what your plans for, what your costs were, or what the lost revenue, maybe not lost revenue, but the losses that you incurred from the business closure, I think is key to have. And I think that you're going to have to delve into your bank statements or your financial statements to see that. So again, that's where you can get that information.
Thank you. And I just wanted to make one quick point of clarification. So for folks, if you have at-home business, you still do qualify if the home is considered your storefront. This was actually stated by the treasurer on a recent webinar, and I imagine it's probably on their frequently asked questions. But if you go to JAC's website, COVID resources, this was something that the treasurer raised and specifically outlined that as long as someone can show proof that their home doubled as their operating storefront, that they should be able to qualify. Sorry.
I was going to tease. I was going to say at this point, I might use my front porch as eligible, eligible square footage.
There you go. Let's see. And I just want to clarify too, there's no, as far as we're aware, and the state treasurer mentioned this as well, that with the LA Main Street program, there's no bar for folks who have prior criminal records. So I just wanted to flag that for those who are formerly incarcerated, re-entering, who would still qualify for this program too. Lindsay, this is a first come, first serve program, right? So like how popular do you think this LA Main Street program is going to be?
So I want to say, do you have the numbers on how much they're actually giving? I think it's like 30 million. Is that what it is?
So there's, well, and this is great. Thanks for bringing this up so I can just sort of break down some of this too. So there's going to be $40 million in grants that are going to be set aside for the first 60 days. And that $40 million is set aside for the first 60 days for women, minority, and veterans owned businesses. You fall in one of those categories, you'll have the first opportunity to receive LA Main Street funding. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, so as of 2018, which was like the last time the USBA, so I have just kind of like a quick profile here. There were 437,437 small businesses in the state of Louisiana. So it's going to be competitive is what I'd like to say. So I think it's really, really important for folks to pull the documentation together if you plan to apply. As someone, so I think that there was some funding available somewhere else where I had read a story that like essentially in the first 24 hours, they had over 40,000 applications. So I know we here in this office have done some micro grants in partnership with the city of New Orleans and Forward Together New Orleans and with the Family Independence Initiative. And for us, I mean, the number of applications that you receive within the first 2 hours is just overwhelming. We've seen those issues also on the unemployment side as well. And so there are a lot of people in the state of Louisiana who need help and need this financial support. So if you think that you're a fit for this program, you should definitely pull the documentation together, familiarize yourself with those frequently asked questions, really gain a solid feeling and footing for whether or not this is the right fit for you, and apply so that you can apply within those first 12 to 24 hours. Just because of the great need that we're really seeing. And again, with over 400,000 businesses in the state of Louisiana, it's going to be fairly competitive. So,
Yes. No, thank you for that. And just to reiterate for folks, July 28th is the date that the Louisiana Treasury expects the program to be ready online for applications. And that website, again, is lahstreet.com. Hopefully everything runs smoothly, of course. If there are issues with that website, I do want to give y'all a number, and I'll copy and paste this number too into the, it'll be their hotline number, and I'll copy and paste this into the comment section. But for the LA Main Street program, if you're having issues with the program, or maybe you have some questions that you want to ask, that phone number is 1-888-795-4947. Yeah, and you can go there for any further questions as well. So I don't see any questions that we have here on our comments section. This panel is going to be, or this video is going to be uploaded to JAC's physical website as well. And Lindsay, I could share a copy of this too if you'd like, so that you can share with your networks too.
that would be fabulous.
But I want to, again, thank you. Yeah, of course. And again, thank you, Lindsay, for making space into your schedule to share with us again on such short notice. This is all, I mean, everything in COVID land has been like by the day kind of chaotic. You were able to set aside some time for us and for the folks that we service. And I really appreciate you being generous with your time, and then also just coordinating so quickly, because folks, the application for the LA Main Street program is up July 28th. So that's a week and a day from today. So thank you so much, Lindsay, for sharing your time with us.
Thank you, Josh. It was really a pleasure and an honor. I'm so glad you guys called. I was really excited to hear from you and to be able to partner in this initiative. And I'm happy to help any way I can. So, you know, if anybody here watching has additional questions and they want to call us, you know, they can call the 504-503-1040 as our office number. You can also shoot me an email, Lindsay, Lindsey at elcentrolaLA.org. As you can see, I speak English and Spanish. So I'm happy to help any way I can. On a good day, I can speak Brazilian too. No,
Oh.
no, that would be, I can understand it. But I'm happy to help you guys and to support any way we can. And again, I think right now, more than ever, is the time to leverage those, the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Because there are so many organizations like El Centro that are really doing great work, helping to connect individuals to the financial resources that they actually need. So, you know, sometimes you might want to hang out with me and talk to me, but I might have someone better to work with you. So, so do look into that system, and you know, we're a phone call away whenever you guys need us.
Great, thank you. And Lindsay, I put El Centro's website link into the comments section too. So folks, if you want to learn more about the work that El Centro does, or maybe you have some follow-up questions for Lindsay, you can find that relevant info on their website, elcentrolaLA.org.
Perfect.
Thank you so much again, Lindsay. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Yep, bye.